Hello, this is Paradox2767, and today I'm going to be making a diorama of Elvis made out of this old radio I've had for a while. I believe it's a 1969 radio, but what we're creating is actually a part of Elvis's life that occurred in 1968, namely his comeback special. I was inspired by the film Elvis, of course, and I decided I wanted to, use my excitement over the film to go ahead and make something of it. So, ignoring all warnings and advice on the back of the box, we started by just disassembling the radio and getting some of the guts out. This is the first time I've tried one of these sort of crafty videos, though I've been watching them for the last few weeks. I've been really into this YouTuber called Boyalai, I believe. I can link to him in the description. He's doing a lot of really great Wild West videos right now where ordinary cowboys have to face off against extraordinary creatures and monsters, and it's super entertaining. So that sort of inspired this, besides, of course, the new Elvis movie. If you want to see any of my thoughts on the Elvis movie, I do have a movie review of sorts on the page here on YouTube. So I'm just getting the guts out. Like I said, I haven't ever done one of these sort of crafty videos, so I've got whatever tools I had laying around the house, the tools I'll be using here, just to sort of rip the pieces out as needed. I then decided I'd clean it up a little bit, just to get some of the grime off of over 50 years of accumulation, I guess. I found the background from an image of the Christmas special, and I started by sort of writing out Elvis and taking notes on all of the bulbs per letter, if that makes sense. The idea was I needed to know how many holes to make in the background. I didn't have that much of an idea how it would all come together, but I needed to figure out how big the background would be and how many holes I'd need. Then I needed to know how tall those letters could be. But then I decided, after figuring out how to record my screen for you guys to see what I'm doing, I decided to go ahead and cheat. I found another image online of those very lights, and I was going to use those as my template instead of doing all of that hard legwork of counting bulbs and things like that. Both of these images, I imagine, are owned by, I think it was CBS who broadcasted the video, by the way. If you ever wanted to check out that special, I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere. Or maybe the Singer Sewing Company has some ownership of these images. I'm not exactly positive. If I feel like doing a little research, maybe I'll throw that in the description. I'm not sure. But anyway, I got the general layout that way, compared it to the background, and it looked good. I knew I wanted it to be about 6 inches tall, just based on the height of the radio itself. So I went ahead and sized it and printed it out. It took me a few tries to print it out, as you can see here. I guess I'll use the other ones for decoration in the apartment somewhere. But basically, I was having trouble getting the right percentage size on my printer, but that was a small setback. And then it was a matter of getting this bulky back out of the radio itself any way I could, which involved some prying and some hammers and some primitive tool use until it actually popped out. My background I thought was going to be made of this cardboard. I guess, spoiler warning, this ended up not working. But I cut it out to what was going to be cut out to size, and I was doing some measurements. But then as I got a little bit further in, I decided that this material was a little too wrinkly, crackly, and wasn't going to look good enough for the backdrop. So I went ahead and found this old binder from school instead. It was already black, which the backdrop was going to be, so that would help a little bit. And I was going to start cutting it to size, which is what I did. I got it to fit perfect inside the radio, cut out my Elvis, that looked great, and I basically taped that on top. So the goal was to hammer nails through each of these little dots on the Elvis sign. What ended up happening, though, after just a few, is that there was a cracking happening between the dots. So what I ended up finding was the bottom half of a game box. It was a game box that had been missing the cover anyway, so I thought, well, now it's going to be missing the bottom. And I decided to cut that down to size, you see there, and kept fitting it within the space. Took a few tries, cut out a few notches for some of the extra footing area there in the internal part of the radio, I guess, and we got that perfect. So then it was time to lay over my Elvis. This time it does work, so don't worry, third time's a charm. I got that all sized up and flattened against it. There are still a bunch of holes in that table now, though. Looks like a woodpecker, heard something crawling around inside the table. But, small price to pay. That's why we didn't use our mahogany, which we don't own. Anyway, this ended up being a first pass with the nails. Then it was a matter of going back and basically having to push the nail all the way through, which I did off camera, just to make the holes a little more, visible. Then I flipped the whole project over and hit it with a razor blade to get some of that excess material off. The idea that by this point was just going to have light shining through the back. At first I was going to go ahead and put light bulbs in each of those little holes, but I decided not to because that was way too many light bulbs for the fixture I'll be showing later. Anyway, then I got all that excess material off the back, went ahead and had to go through it again, I believe, with nails. I had to go through all those little Elvis holes many times for this, but eventually it was time to figure out the lighting. So for that, I was going to shine some light through an already red piece of material that my wife was kind enough to pick up from the store. However, I decided it was a little more salmon than red, so I got myself a red Sharpie to mend that problem a little later. In the meantime, I decided to paint the backdrop black, which it was destined to be. I found a little bit of paint in our basement. It wasn't very much, but it ended up being just enough to sort of cover the whole Elvis sign as needed. And then it was time to put that red backdrop on the back. So I did that. I had an idea to enhance it with the Sharpie, so I overlaid this Elvis sign and try to figure out what parts needed darkening, and I scrapped that idea because once I taped that material to the back of the Elvis sign, it got a lot easier to go over with a Sharpie just to darken that red for the sake of the lights shining through later. Having run out of paint, I was wondering what I was going to do for the walls and ceiling, and I didn't feel like going to the store, and so I decided I'd use records, actual records. So if you saw the last video where I was reviewing the Elvis movie and I was talking about how I picked up a few records, these are those records. Just kidding. I knew I wouldn't defile my great shape my Elvis records. I decided to keep those. I've been listening to them a lot, so these are just some junky ones I had laying around the house. We'll get back to the crafting of the top and bottom a little bit later, but I was sort of excited, so I gathered my materials early. Now we'll show a little bit about how I crafted the front of the radio. I wanted it to look like it was still a functional radio, so I had a few different numbers to play with. I could pick the time, I could pick a few different settings on the radio, and I wanted those all to be meaningful. So what I did was set the time for 9 o'clock sharp, which is when the Christmas special would have aired. And then as for the second and that fourth hand, the second hand, and whatever that red hand was meant for, I decided I was going to point those towards 68, which is the year that the special came out. So I decided to do that. There's another dial that I don't know if you can quite see. That's part of that same clock face, and I don't know what it did, but it pointed from 0 to 60. So I decided to point it right around the 33 mark, which is the age of Elvis when he filmed the special. The other knob on the other side just says whether or not I think the alarm's on. I put the alarm on because Elvis is such an alarming guy. So then as far as the other dial, I decided to set the radio to FM and then the channel itself to 95.7, which is Milwaukee's oldies radio station where I'm from. At least at the time of filming, that's our oldies station, or one of them at least. So I went ahead and put that knob in and set it to FM. I think that knob ends up falling out eventually though, so the final build, it's technically not there, but I really am not bothered by that at all, so that's fine. Kind of glued everything in place, fastened it, and called that part already. Next, I flipped it over, started messing with the lighting a little bit, and basically I'm using these different little click lights that we have laying around the house. I'll be using 2 of them in the build just so that there's plenty of light behind that Elvis sign. So I'm kind of playing with that a little bit, figuring out how I'm going to affix it to the back. Eventually I decided to just crumple up the little string of lights and just have it kind of randomly in the back, and that did fine for me. I'm testing it here, and there's a little sneak preview of the Elvis light up, which ends up looking great. And then I take it out for a little bit more crafting. My next project was to figure out that top and bottom of the record. So I snipped off a bit of vinyl for this project. It turns out vinyl cuts all right. It gets a little cracky, shatters in places, but with a tape on the back, it ended up being a minor issue and working out great. That was The material, though, that's going to be our flooring and our ceiling and the walls there. It's going to be that dark vinyl. It works well anyway because based on the images I saw of the concert itself, it looks like there was some pretty glossy floor going on, so the vinyl looks like it'll do great for that. At that point, I realized that you can still kind of see some of the cardboard around the Elvis dots, so I went in with a Sharpie and kind of Sharpied all those in just so it was a little darker for the sign itself. Next up, I decided I need a little Elvis cardboard cutout for my main figure. So on Photoshop, I tried to cut out the shape of him, and then I quickly abandoned that because I realized I'll be cutting out of paper anyway. So I got myself a bit of Elvis paper and I went to town. Once he was all cut out, I went around with a Sharpie just so he looked a little cleaner, and then I put him aside. I decided I was going to use our lighting fixtures, as you see, for some footing on the radio itself, just so I could still have access to change the batteries and things like that. That's all the lighting. I'm not very good with technology, or especially hardwire and things like that necessarily, so I sort of just stuffed it all in there. And there was no chance of me rewiring anything, so what you see is sort of what you get on this build. We were almost ready then for the Elvis sign. However, I found out that there was some uneven backing in the box itself, so to fix that I needed a popsicle stick, which means I needed a popsicle eaten, which was a great excuse on a hot day like today to eat one. Eventually I had my popsicle stick and glued it into place there as a sort of spacer. Then with all the lines stuffed in the back, we were ready for that Elvis backdrop. Next, I wanted to measure out the side walls, so I measured our box again, plus the width of some vinyl, and that gave me an idea of how wide those side walls would have to be. So I cut that out of another record. Then, not really wanting the center logo of the record at all, I just cut the fins off from there, and those were our two side walls. I sort of started laying everything out and putting the tops and bottoms down, gluing those into place, and after a little bit of fidgeting and extra cutting on those side walls, those are able to slide in place well. Looking a little incomplete to my eye, I decided I was going to add some sort of corner pieces, also made of vinyl, just to kind of frame the whole thing. I got those in place, and then I decided to go ahead and add some broken records around the extra radio area. I figured, Elvis broke a lot of records in his career, so that seemed to fit. Once all those corner pieces were done, I was ready to show off. This was a lot of fun to build. As I said, it was inspired by the new film Elvis by Baz Luhrmann. Check out my review if you're interested at all in hearing my thoughts on it. I definitely recommend you see it. This video was brought to you by the Zodiac Dozen, my book series. I got 4 out so far of 12. Each of them follows a different character who has a different zodiac sign, and they're be coming out monthly. For more information, you can check out our Instagram, where we have daily updates and fun facts. Thank you.